All right, everyone, welcome to the Census LGBTQ plus edition. I'm Christian, the Census Fellow from Long Beach Forward, and my pronouns are he and they. And today I have Jeremy from Equality California, the largest statewide LGBTQ civil rights organization that works at the local, state, and national level. I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today. Could you introduce yourselves and give yourself a summary of your work at Equality California?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Jeremy Payne, Associate Program Director with Equality California. For those unfamiliar with Equality California, we're the nation's largest statewide LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. And the work that the organization focuses on is to achieve full-lived LGBTQ equality by reducing disparities in health and well-being, developing a pipeline of LGBTQ plus leaders, and important right now with this conversation and topic, increasing civic participation as much as possible within the community. So my focus at the organization is primarily in the civic participation field, working on everything from voter engagement to census engagement.
Awesome. And I thank you so much for that. And I'm really excited for us to talk about the importance of the census for the LGBTQ plus community. So right now we are at a critical moment in our nation and state's history as we bear witness to the systemic oppression that has impacted minority population for years, especially the LGBTQ plus community and the Black community. How can the census help us in the pivotal moment that we are in?
Yeah, so before talking about how or why the census is important, it's a little easier or helpful for folks to learn about what the census is, because that is a learning curve for a lot of folks. So just very briefly, the census is a snapshot in time, a demographic snapshot of our country. And regardless of your age, ethnicity, immigration status, or sex, you are counted. And it's important to be counted because that data drives all decision making in our country, economically and politically. So in terms of the LGBTQ plus community and the diverse communities to which we belong, which is primarily other marginalized communities, be them those experiencing homelessness or housing instability, those that live within or are part of the or minority community as well, a racial ethnic minority, to those just experiencing poverty, which can all make us hard to count. So when it comes to decision making economically, there are over 300 federal programs and $800 billion in federal funds that are allocated based on census data. These funds go to things like roads, schools, hospitals, and emergency response services, things you've probably been hearing before. But it's important to know that these are all things that our LGBTQ plus community needs, especially in a pandemic like right now. Beyond that, there are also things that the census funds, including Medicaid and SNAP, which are critical to LGBTQ plus families. Something that's not commonly known is that 1 out of 5 LGBTQ plus families uses SNAP or Medicaid. SNAP being more commonly known as food stamps and things like that. This is double the rate of non-LGBTQ plus families. So there's a definite need for our families. And this is not something that people normally consider when thinking about LGBTQ plus folks in our community as a whole, especially around Pride Month. It can be misconstrued that we are a thriving, affluent community, but when you understand the disparities that LGBTQ people face in terms of increased racial discrimination, homelessness, and poverty, the bigger picture becomes clear. And then lastly, there's a power representation dynamic that's important to LGBTQ plus folks. Right now, people can understand the political climate that we're in. There is congressional maps and an electoral college that favor anti-LGBTQ plus representatives. So if LGBTQ plus Californians aren't counted and the diverse communities to which we belong aren't counted as well, this could be true for another 10 years for us. So quite simply, I know that was a lot, but at the end of the day, everyone deserves a fair and accurate census to ensure their government works for them and reflects who they are. And that's critical for the LGBTQ plus community.
Awesome. Thank you so much for highlighting the importance of the LGBTQ plus census because it impacts, since what you said earlier, impacts federal funding and the way that we're represented in, when it comes to political representation. So I know that a lot of LGBTQ plus folks and many more are concerned regarding certain parts of the census. And I know the number one thing that people talk about is concerns regarding confidentiality. Many folks are concerned about this of personal information that's shared in the census. Could you describe whether the census data is private and secure? Are there any particular laws in place to ensure confidentiality?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a question I get often, given again the political climate that we're in. And so when I get the question, is the census safe? The short answer, yes. The more detailed answer is that yes, because of constitutional protections. So Title 13 requires your information to be kept confidential on the census and prevents your responses from being used against you by a government agency. This also extends to law enforcement. So that is your constitutional right, but there's also measures to enforce it. So the US Census Bureau, let me get this right, are subject to a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in federal prison for wrongful disclosure information. So there are protections and enforcement beyond just the constitutional protection, which can just be words. So know that when you fill out the census, your information is safe, secure, and protected by legal action if necessary.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And it definitely is important to know that there are laws in place for people's protection. And I know there are some other concerns that LGBTQ plus folks have when it comes to the questions on the census. So to start off, the sex question, as we know, does not accurately represent the spectrum of gender identities, which can cause potential confusion and frustration for those who identify as trans, non-binary, or gender non-conforming. So with this in mind, what is the best way to face this particular question when people start filling out their census?
Absolutely. And first, just want to acknowledge it because I feel like a lot of agencies kind of just give a response of how to fill it out before acknowledging how frustrating and triggering it can be for those in our community. Because it's not universal for everyone in the LGBTQ community to feel left out by that question, because there are disparities even within our community, and there are different lived experiences within our community as well. So first, just want to acknowledge that it is a struggle, not just on the census, but nearly all federal forms that are out there for our transgender and gender nonconforming communities. So when it comes to the census, although the census does not include a specific gender identity or sexual orientation question, I'll shorten that by saying SOGI, S-O-G-I. The Census Bureau respects how people self-identify. And what I mean by that is that the Census Bureau is not cross-checking information with any other source like a birth certificate or a driver license record. And since you are restricted to those few options, you can just answer as best as you can with how you self-identify. That's not a perfect answer, but it's important that we are counted in the hopes that soon we'll be counted accurately. So if you're uncomfortable still of answering this question, we understand as an LGBTQ plus organization. But just know that by skipping the question, the US Census Bureau will randomly generate an answer for you. So if you prefer to make a choice rather than have someone choose who you are, know that your answers won't be cross-checked. And so I say answer with how you best self-identify and to how comfortable you are of answering like that.
Cool, and I can see how alleviating that is to know that they don't cross-check and that you have the choice to answer as best as you can, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the relationship and home address question, we know that that does not represent the living situation LGBTQ plus folks. It may not represent situations such as temporary housing, living with your partner or partners, and living with chosen family. So for folks that are experiencing these circumstances and beyond, what do you think would be the best way to face these particular questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So just expanding on that, the census form is not truly comprehensive. It's a form that's attempting to capture a demographic snapshot. But again, when you fill out the census, whoever's filling out the census talks about the relation to everyone else in that home. So a lot of LGBTQ plus folks and other marginalized communities kind of double up in homes with people who don't have a relation with one another. It could be a friend, it could just be a extended or like relative, something like that. And because of that, your LGBTQ plus status won't be represented because you don't have a relation to the person filling out that form. That's a relation that the US Census Bureau would see as a relationship in terms of like a spouse or a partner. So, so when it comes to filling out the form, again, it's important to know that you should still be counted for the above reasons, that $800 billion and those 300 federal programs, because regardless of how you are counted, if you are just counted as a human being, that still brings that money to your community. And so in terms of the relational question in the household, it's important to kind of just have that conversation with the person filling out the form. If it'd be more helpful for someone to fill out the form who is a couple, so they can show that it's an LGBTQ household versus the person who may be single in that household filling out for their roommates who are a couple. So there's some ways that you can kind of navigate around that to make sure that you're represented fully. But again, it's an imperfect form because of the complexities and nuances of our society.
Yeah. So considering like these imperfect questions and the fact that these questions don't accurately represent the lives of LGBTQ plus folks, are there efforts to try to change these questions so that they do identify align with the person's identity and living situation?
Absolutely. And one of the kind of first things, kind of as an example of that, is that this 2020 census is the first time you can identify someone living in your household as a same-sex spouse or partner, even if unmarried. And that wasn't always true. That took a lot of LGBTQ plus organizations advocating to their local elected officials and the public reaching out to their local elected officials to really call for them to make this change congressionally. And so Equality California and LGBTQ organizations across the nation are still leading this fight for comprehensive SOGI markers on the 2030 census, which would be the next one. And again, all federal forms, because this isn't an isolated incident. Social Security applications still have a binary, and a lot of other federal forms still have a binary. And we just continue to work and advocate, and not just organizations, but the public as well, the LGBTQ community, where a resilient community that has been advocating for change for a long time. And we should continue this fight when it comes to the census. So hopefully through a lot of this work, the 2030 census can be an opportunity for us to be counted for our true authentic selves for the first time.
Awesome, thank you. And last question that I have is there anything else that you would like us to know about the census?
Oh my gosh, about the census, just know how important it is to your community. It's easy to think on the macro level of like that, those $800 billion, when you get in the billions, you can't really comprehend what that means to your community. But think about it on a personal level. So here in California, every person who fills out the census is worth $2,000 per year for the next 10 years. So think about it individually. If you were to bring back $20,000 because of the 10 years, to your community, what could that look like in terms of roads being paved, in terms of community clinics being available, in terms of textbooks in your kids' classrooms? $20,000 per person can truly bring a big change to your local community. And people need to think locally to think about the impact that it's going to have globally. And so that's kind of my selling point on the census, is that don't get lost in the macro, think micro.
Awesome. And thank you so much for highlighting the importance of this, especially for LGBTQ plus folks. I think information, just like what you said, is going to be really important so that LGBTQ plus folks are more aware of the importance of the census and things like that. So again, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And we hope that this has highlighted the importance of LGBTQ plus folks taking census, and we hope that this has simplified the process of filling it out. Jeremy, would you like to make any announcements about Equality California's work and what you all are up to?
Absolutely. So we're living in a very unique time. I know commercials are saying that quite a bit, but given everything that's going on, for right now for an LGBTQ civil rights organization, there's a lot when it comes to shaping communities around racial justice. And so one of those opportunities that we have coming up on Wednesday, I believe it's the 24th, yes, will be a Solidarity and Pride. It is a virtual Pride event that we are going to be having and recording for folks to view afterwards to center Black leaders, advocates, and artists within the LGBTQ plus community and our allies, because there is a need to support each other in a fight against hatred and oppressive systems, and that needs to be grounded in the LGBTQ plus community, because the LGBTQ community was led by Black and Latinx leaders and advocates. So really are just wanting to take this opportunity to really highlight the civil rights of LGBTQ plus community is much more diverse and much more expanded right now, and want to make sure that this is an opportunity for people to learn the history and know what they can do moving forward. So I hope people can watch the recorded video. We'll have it feature on our Facebook, our YouTube page, as well as our Twitter page.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it's the last little thing. If you want any more updates about Equality California's work, you could just go to EQCA.org. And so we just want to give this last reminder to take 10 minutes of your time to fill out 10 questions that will affect you for the next 10 years of your life, your family's life, and your community. We hope this video has helped, and we thank you all.
All right, thank you so much.